thank you very much for your patience this morning. I am Rebecca Jennings. I am Principal Client Advisor here at Global Reviews. My role this morning for the next half an hour, 45 minutes or so, is to talk to you about some of the research that we've been conducting in financial services, specifically around making the big decisions. We run a lot of research across a number of markets, certainly in financial services, looking at current accounts, credit cards, bank accounts, both post-login and login. But what we're going to be talking about this morning is some research we have around loans and mortgages. So how do consumers research these sort of big financial decisions? Which brands do they look at? How do they do their first research when they don't really know which brands would be interesting to them? And then what happens when they actually reach the websites of the brands that they're interested in? How do the websites deal with that research? So that's really what we're going to talk about this morning. As I say, my name is Rebecca Jennings. I'm a Principal Client Advisor at Global Reviews. I've been at Global Reviews for around 4.5 years now. Previous to that, I was an advisor at Forrester Research for 10 years. Previous to that, I was at the BBC. So I'm going to do a very quick introduction to Global Reviews for those of you who don't know us very quickly. Then I'm just going to talk about the methodologies that have gone into the research that we're talking about here. There are two distinct methodologies that we've been working with over the last number of years. So I'm going to talk to you very quickly about those. Then I'm just going to talk you through some of the results. What have we actually seen in these markets over the last waves of this research, and obviously what does that actually mean for the businesses in this market. So, as I say, very quickly, for those of you who don't know Global Reviews, we have been running now for about 15 years, founded in 2000, operating across a number of territories, Australia, New Zealand, both UK, obviously Ireland, and European markets. As I mentioned, we work across a number of markets, not just financial services. Obviously, financial services is our focus this morning. And as I say, we work across both login, post-login, pre-login areas, across current accounts, credit cards, bank loans, investments, for example. But also we work across a number of other markets, a lot of insurance, for example, home insurance, motor insurance. We also work across retail, we work across sports betting, mobiles, energy as a strong market of ours. So working with a number of key brands across these territories, across the digital consumer analytics and competitor intelligence spaces. And what we do particularly is look at how consumers find brands in these markets and how the brands in these markets help consumers make choices and then transact on their websites. We help brands understand consumer behavior, find why they're losing consumers to competitors in the market. We can tell you more about the intentions of these consumers than you've ever been able to discover before, both in terms of how they find brands in the markets and how they choose brands, who you're losing consumers to and why they're choosing you, why they're choosing your competitors. And then actually when they come to your website, what are you doing well in terms of showing your brand, showing your products and converting consumers, but also what are you doing poorly, what are your pains, and what are other people in the market doing better. So that's really what we're going to talk about today in terms of loans and mortgages, so making those big decisions. We're going to talk about how consumers find brands in these markets, what you might call the discover phase on this slide. So how are consumers discovering brands in those markets? Are your competitors winning your prospective customers, and why and how? Moving into the consider phase, so how do they choose brands at this point? Who makes their shortlist to have further discussion, have further research, and then how do they choose which brands, which websites they're going to look at, and then into the consider and act phase is, well, when consumers actually come to your own website and say, well, what have you got for me? How can I decide whether I want to transact with you or not? How do you deal with them on your own website? And indeed, how do your competitors do? Because the research we do is very much based on a competitive set. And we will see how your competitors do in these markets as well as yourselves. So, as I say, the phases we're going to talk about today are really those discover and consider and to a certain degree the act phases. The DME and the DSE are the methodologies that I was going to talk about. I said and mentioned in the morning earlier this morning there were a couple of methodologies that we focus on. So what I'm going to do very quickly is just talk to you about what those methodologies are, and then we're going to go into some of the research. So as I say, there are two distinct methodologies that we focus on in these markets. The digital marketing effectiveness methodology is this piece that looks at how consumers find brands in these markets when they realize they need a new mortgage, they have a need for a loan. How do they think about brands in this market? Which brands they think of before they do any research? Then how do they then conduct that research? Which sites do they go to? Which aggregator sites? How do they search? Which terms do they use to search for? Where do they go to from the search pages? Which websites do they visit? Which brands make their shortlist? And then which brand at this point reaches their sort of final consideration at this point, the DME, this is conducted using 200 in-market consumers. It's a blank screen study done in their own homes on their own technology, and we essentially pre-qualify them by making sure they're in market for this kind of product over the next 3 to 6 months. And we say, well, go and find a brand to give you a home loan or a mortgage or a personal loan. We can track everything they do. We have a little applet that's downloaded onto their computer when they sign up to do the study. So we can track their click streams, we can track the search terms they use, we can track where they go, as I say, from when they use those search terms, which sites they visit as a result of that search. And then we, of course, ask them questions about that journey. So we can see which brands they preferred at the beginning, who they visit, who they search for, how those decisions start to change when they see that information, which brands they put on their shortlist to consider in more depth, and then finally which brands at this point would they choose as their final provider. And we can see all the way through the journey what influences there are on that journey, through that shortlist, through that funnel, if you like. So that's the DME. That's how they find the brands. The DSE, the digital sales effectiveness research that we run, is again a mixture, looking at, again, in-market consumers, but this time it's combining in-market consumer insight with a best practice audit that is conducted by Global Reviews ourselves. So what we do here is we have, again, a number of consumers, 50 consumers for each client. They are asked to go through a number of tasks on a website. So it could be Barclays, could be Nationwide, one of the sites in the benchmark of the competitive set. They're asked to go through a number of tasks that involve finding products, finding costs, finding specific products that suit specific needs. We can see how successful they are at each of those tasks. We can track their behavior. We ask them some questions about that engagement, so we can see their attitude. Was it easy? Was it hard? What did they find hard? What were the problems they had in achieving those tasks? And then we also have an audit from the consumers of the features and functions they would expect to see, and what the site actually provided for them. So we have that insight from the customers, but as I say, within the DSC, this is also combined with a best practice audit of around 300 criteria across that journey, which is conducted by the Global Reviews analysts internally. So actually within the DSE, there ends up being something in the region of 450 data points all the way through the journey that consumers take on your site. So we start with the DME. Digital marketing effectiveness, how do they find the brands, how do they make those decisions about which brands to research, which brands make the shortlist. Then the DSE takes it the next step of, okay, they've come to your website. What is the journey like on your website? Are you satisfying consumers when they're coming to you looking for a product? Can they find a product that suits their needs? Can they go through the application process? And the DSE, it's combining the consumer insight with that insight from the audit. So, as I say, the DSE takes consumers through this journey from initially engaging on your website through finding products, introducing options, evaluating, do they actually suit my needs, facilitating decisions, well, do I actually want to buy from you as opposed to somebody else? I found 3 loans that look very similar. What's the difference? Why am I buying it from you? And then through to the act phase, which is, well, how do I apply for this? Can I do it online? Can I go through the online application process? So those are the methodologies that we look at across these markets, the DME and the DSE. And those are really what we're going to talk through today, but through the lens of mortgages and personal loans. How do consumers think about these slightly bigger ticket items? How do they go about researching these products, and how they go about deciding who they will actually go with in terms of transacting? But then actually, how do the websites fulfill that when they come to the website to actually go through and find the product and do the transaction? How does the website support that process? So let's start at the beginning. Say, beginning of this blank screen idea of let's go and find a mortgage or a personal loan. In terms of how long consumers are going to take in this process, what is your scope for changing their minds, if you like? What is your scope for helping them? What is the window that you have in order to interact with these consumers for this product? With a loan, consumers tell us it's around 3 to 4 hours elapsed time over 2 or 3 days, and they'd probably consider 4 or 5 brands in depth in that process. They probably look at the top of the funnel at a number, but actually when it comes to perhaps drilling down into the features and functions and the actual interest rates, they'll be considering 4 or 5. So pretty short time frame here for the loan. Unsurprisingly, it's a little bit more time consuming in terms of a mortgage. 8 to 10 hours, it's probably a little low in fact, but 8 to 10 hours over a few weeks, and they'll be considering 5 or 6 brands even at the shortlist point for the mortgage. There's more scope within the mortgage, obviously, to interrupt that journey. It's a more involved process. But actually, when we look at the journey that they take and the kind of decisions that they're making, it is interesting in terms of how much more perhaps flexibility there is within the loan process than there is within the mortgage, even though, as I say, perhaps the mortgage is taking longer. So that's how long we've got. When we think about where consumers are when they start this journey, obviously within the DME, when you've got a blank screen, when you're starting your journey, you don't, as a consumer, start from a position of completely no knowledge about the market, or it's unlikely that you'll start from a position of completely no insight into the market. You do come with some thinking or some preconceptions perhaps about brands in the market. So obviously at the beginning of the methodology, beginning of the DME, we always ask consumers, well, if you had to make a decision now before doing any research, who would you go with? Most consumers in most of the studies we do come with a brand in mind. Most of us have a bit of a legacy in our minds. So for mortgages, 69% had an initial preference. 71% of that 69 said it was because they were current customers. They perhaps had a current account with this branch. Maybe even they've had an existing mortgage. So 69%, so more than 2/3 actually come with a preconception of who they would choose. The vast majority then go on to use a search engine in their process, but actually a lot of them don't enter the preferred brand name into the search engine. They many of them think, well, actually, I kind of know about that brand already. I know that would make my consideration set. I don't need to go and do an awful lot of research to figure out that would still at this point be in my consideration set. So I'm going to look for other brands. We'll look in a moment specifically about what they look for. Only 50% actually even visit the preferred brand's website, because again, there's a legacy feeling that actually, no, I know what they've got, and certainly at this point, in this sort of fairly early stage of the research, I feel I know what they've got. But actually what happens is that in the end, 40% choose another brand as their final preference. So even though most come in thinking, oh, I've got an existing preference here, actually 60%, only 60% stay with that, 40% are swayed to another brand, and we'll see in a moment who those brands are and who's winning those clients away, and actually how that search process works. Because again, it happens the same, in fact even more so within the loans market. In fact, actually 75% of consumers of looking for a loan actually had an initial preference, and again, mostly that's because they are current customers. Interestingly, here there's a much wider range of brands being suggested as an initial preference. In mortgages, there are about 4 or 5 brands who come up as initial preferences, Nationwide being the biggest. When we look at loans, there's a wide variety of brands being suggested as an initial preference. Still, mostly because consumers are current customers, but it's a much wider initial base, if you like, of brands that are putting their hats in the ring here, or successfully convincing consumers at the beginning that they are worth considering. Again, search very powerful here, and we'll see in a moment what consumers actually search for. But again, 80% don't enter the preferred brand name into the search engine. They feel they know what the offerings are. They feel they know this brand. They're quite unlikely to visit the preferred brand's website again. And again, 40% choose another brand as a final preference. So actually, again, consumers are being swayed in this journey through the search journey and through the aggregator journey, which we'll talk about in a minute, to another brand, even if they come in with a preference. So even those who come in with a preference, it's perfectly possible to change their minds. And as I say, let's have a look at what happens in that journey to start changing consumers' minds. So what do they actually search for when they go to these search engines? We saw the power here of search engines. Vast majority of consumers in both markets using them at some point in the journey. And of course, obviously, in many cases, several points in the journey. They don't just come to a search engine and then go off. They do some research, they come back to the search engine, they put in another term, and they go back again. So it's a sort of iterative process. So what are they actually looking for when they use this? When they use the search engines? We've got, certainly in mortgages, mostly industry phrases, so mortgage broker, provider, or just the word mortgage, or mortgage lenders. The one exception there is you can see you've got Nationwide actually gets searched for as a brand within the search process. I said at the beginning, when we asked consumers who would be your preference, Nationwide actually come out as having the highest percentage of first preferences before consumers have actually done any research. So that sort of goes into this search behavior. They're clearly top of mind when it comes to mortgages, but obviously the rest of the search terms there are very generic industry terms. Similarly, within loans, you've got loans coming up as the top, but actually, again, slightly differently here, you've got money supermarket and money saving expert. So actually, when in the loans market, consumers are knowing that actually the first place they want to go really is a comparison site. And interestingly, we all do it. A large percentage of us, rather than just typing money supermarket as a URL, they type it into the search box and then go. Even if they know where they want to go, they type the name of the company into the search box. So sort of going through the Google, even if you necessarily really need to, because you know where you want to go. Again, you've got Nationwide coming in there, and First Direct. You've got a couple of brands coming in the search. And where do they actually end up going? In mortgages, you're seeing from those very generic search terms, the key sites visited are, again, comparison sites, money supermarket, money saving expert. So comparison stroke, aggregator stroke, research advice sites are the most popular sites visited from search, followed by Nationwide and indeed Halifax, actually, in our top 5 in terms of sites visited, but in the strength of the aggregators. You're seeing it again in the loans, Money Supermarket, Money Saving Expert, but then it starts to get a little bit interesting. You've seen the Nationwide and First Direct for the brands that came out in terms of the search phrases used, but they're not the sites people go to having done the Googling, having done the searching. They go to the aggregators, but they then go to Tesco, Santander and Barclays, which would suggest at a first stage here that actually there's a lot of sort of interesting SEO or PPC going on from, certainly I would suggest Tesco's, from looking at the terms that consumers are using and saying, actually, well, we as Tesco's want to be on that front page when consumers search for loans, or when they search for Money Supermarket, or when they search for Money Saving Expert. We want them to see Tesco's as well and present the fact that we now do personal loans. So immediately you've got Tesco's in there trying to capture some of this loan traffic, but you're not getting Nationwide and First Direct fulfill what you might have suggested, when we might think is a sort of natural step, people searching for the terms, but actually not so much actually going to them. So immediately you're seeing something sort of shift there, and we'll see in a minute more of that shift and the power of the aggregators in this market, and the power of some of the other brands just chipping away at the edges of what are established brands. So very much you can already see from the search behavior some of the things that are going on in this market. So what actually happens over this journey? Who is succeeding? And we'll drill a little bit further into why some of this might be in a moment. But you can immediately see here in terms of mortgages, movement of consumer preference from the first preference, and I said at the beginning that Nationwide were the strongest in terms of an initial preference. They actually managed to continue that through to the final preference at the bottom of the funnel. So Nationwide come in with about 23% of consumers preferring them, and actually that's pretty much what they get at the end. Same with Santander and Halifax. They managed to maintain the initial to final preferences, and then it gets interesting. Then we start to see a couple of other brands really using the search journey and using the aggregator journey to convince consumers to pick them. Particularly here you've got HSBC, who come in with a very low initial preference of around 2%. By the end, they're actually convincing around 8% of consumers to choose them as their mortgage provider. So they sort of quadruple their choices, the percentage of consumers who choose them, through that search journey and through that information journey, through the search and the website and the aggregators. You've also got down at the other end of the curve, you've got the Tesco and the TSB, again, coming through from pretty much zero initial preference and pushing themselves through that discover journey to make it to people's final choice. And actually this movement from initial to final preference is actually more marked within the loans journey. It's actually very marked here. We've started off, the blue bar is our initial preferences, so as you can see, at the beginning of this journey, I said it was a bit more widespread than mortgages, and you can see here we had 8% of consumers prefer Barclays, 8% Lloyds, 7% HSBC, Santander. So quite a variety of brands at the beginning of this journey being selected before research. And then the research journey, specifically for loans, really does seem to be making an impact in the final brand chosen. You can see by the red bars. Those bigger brands, Barclays, Lloyds, HSBC, all losing consumers through that journey. Their final preference is actually lower than their initial preference. And then the next tranche, those we saw coming up through that search, if you remember, coming up as the destinations from the search journey, the Tesco's, Santander's, Sainsburys here too, all getting a markedly higher final preference than their initial preference. So somehow within that journey, consumers are being switched away from, perhaps you might call the traditional financial services providers of these services, towards perhaps less traditional providers. So the Sainsburys, the Tesco's, the M&S, even Zupa here, which is a peer-to-peer lending brand, managing to steal consumers away, essentially, from these traditional brands. So who are they actually stealing the consumers from? Who are the really big losers here? And how are these brands managing to convince consumers that they're a better bet for what is a big financial decision journey, a financial decision product? And interestingly, sometimes when we do this in other markets, it's obvious that the new entrants are stealing primarily from one or two big brands in the market. And actually that doesn't seem to be the case within the loans and mortgages. These newer entrants seem to be stealing from brands across the board. So everybody needs to be concerned about the impact that they'll be having. So this is loans, and we just saw the big impact of Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's going from, as you can see here, around a 4% initial preference to around a 14% initial final preference, a big jump, and the most preferred brand at the end. And who are they stealing from? So this is the first preferences of those who eventually chose Sainsbury's. So who did they come in thinking they were going to choose, but they ended up choosing Sainsbury's at the end? And as you can see, as I say, there's a wide range of brands represented here, from Barclays, Lloyds, Santander, the bigger brands, through to some of the smaller, again, non-traditional brands, the Marks and Spencers, the Tesco's. 32% had no preference, so they've gone through the process with an open mind and plumped for Sainsbury's at the end. But obviously that means that a full 68% of these consumers had a preference. 13% already preferred Sainsbury's. So again, about 50% of these consumers had their minds changed by this search journey. Sainsbury's managed to convince them through the journey that they had a better product, a better loan, than the brand they came in thinking about. Similarly, as I say, with mortgages, again, it's not the case here that HSBC are just stealing from one or two of the big brands. They're stealing from Halifax, First Direct, Nationwide, NatWest, Woolwich. So a number of the brands in the market HSBC are managing to, again, steal consumers away from. They're also successful in swaying those who don't have an initial preference. So 46% of these consumers didn't have an initial preference. So HSBC, again, have managed to show them fairly quickly and simply. This is not a very long process. The DME is not something that takes weeks for consumers to go through. It's a short process, relatively short process, where consumers are winnowing down a short list of brands. So actually HSBC have managed to get in really effectively and quickly and convince consumers that they have a product that suits their needs. And why are consumers making these final choices? Why are they choosing these, perhaps you might slightly call disruptor brands, over the well-established brand that perhaps they went in thinking they would prefer? So let's have a look here at some of the key reasons consumers choose the different brands that they've chosen. So let's have a look at why consumers are choosing Sainsbury's over Nationwide for loans, for example. So we saw, so again, Sainsbury's, the finally biggest chosen brand that we have in the market. They went to a 14% final choice from a 4% initial preference. But the reasons consumers choosing brands are very different. If we look at Nationwide, the biggest reason consumers are choosing Nationwide are very much based on brand relationship. They're based on I trust this company. They're based on I've used them before. They are also based on good interest rate options as well. It's not simply the brand. The product seems to be offering a good rate as well. But primarily, people are really saying, look, I went for Nationwide because it's a brand I know. It's a brand I trust. And when I did a quick look, it looked as though they got good interest rate options. If you flip that round, why are people choosing Sainsbury's? Primarily, it is because of their good interest rate options, but also you can see their best offers accounts for my needs. So it isn't just about the cheapest product, it's about knowing quickly, through a little bit of research on the Sainsbury's site and through the search engine and the aggregator information, that the product actually suits my needs the best. It suits it better than the brands that I might haven't initially come into the market thinking I was going to choose. So Nationwide, leveraging very much an existing relationship, a trust relationship with the consumers, but Sainsbury's actually coming in and going, actually, we can provide just as good a rate, and we can convince you that the offer is better for your needs than perhaps the incumbent brand who's perhaps resting on its laurels a little. And we see that within mortgages as well. Again, we saw HSBC, not the strongest choice at the end. It wasn't bigger than Nationwide, but actually, if you remember, HSBC had grown its preferences quite significantly from the beginning, at the expense of a number of brands, including Nationwide. So Nationwide comes in very strongly, but actually it is losing consumers to HSBC. And again, why is that? Nationwide, why are consumers choosing Nationwide? I've used them before. I trust this company. Again, Nationwide got a good foothold with these consumers. They trust it. They know it. They have an existing relationship with it. It's where they gravitate to. But actually, when you look at why consumers choose HSBC, and again, it's good interest rate options, and again, coming out best offers accounts for my needs. Again, same with Nationwide. But again, HSBC somehow is showing consumers quickly and easily that they have a good rate and that they have a product that might be interesting, even though consumers come in with a positive feeling towards Nationwide. So how is that happening? What's sort of the influencer here? And you can really see the power of the aggregators when we actually look at drilling down into why consumers change their minds. The websites themselves play a part, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but just finishing up on the DME piece, looking at the power of the aggregators, and it's very stark actually in a couple of these instances, the power of aggregators over the decisions that consumers make. So what we've simply done here is said, well, final preferences of those who went to aggregators and those who didn't go to aggregators, and how different are they? And this is for the loan. So again, Sainsbury's strong here. Sainsbury's the strongest brand. But you can see here really how brands like Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's, Tesco, and Zopa are really benefiting from that aggregator journey. So terms say Marks and Spencer, 8% of those who didn't go to the aggregators chose them, but 13% of those who went to the aggregators did. Zopa, just 2% of those who didn't go to aggregators chose them. Full 9% of those who did were swayed to the brand. And the flip side for those traditional financial services brands, the Barclays, the Halifax, the HSBCs of this world, Lloyds, again, the percentage of consumers who chose them who went to aggregators is much smaller than those who did go to aggregators. So the aggregator journey is swaying consumers away from those traditional financial services brands towards these non-traditional brands, very much within the loan journey, but also within the mortgage journey. The mortgage journey we've seen so far is a little bit more stable than the loans. Nationwide have held on to those consumers overall. But actually, when you look at those who went to aggregators, that changes quite considerably. 18% of those who went to aggregators chose Nationwide, 29% of those who didn't. So the aggregator journey really has an effect on Nationwide's final choice. People are much more swayed towards the brands like HSBC, Santander, Halifax if they go through an aggregator on their research journey. Those who didn't are more likely to stick with Nationwide, again, because we saw earlier, they know the brand, they trust it. But actually, if they take that next step and do a bit more research into what might suit their needs best, into what else is out there in the market, actually, it's quite likely that their minds will be changed towards the smaller brands, the HSBCs, the Santanders, and the Halifax. So really interesting to see how consumers' initial minds might be changed depending on which journey they take through search and through the aggregators. But also, of course, as I said at the beginning, this isn't just about how they've discovered brands. It's actually about how, when they come to the website to do that journey about what products have you got, does it suit my needs, how well do the sites themselves actually then help consumers do that research. So what I'm going to talk about here now, just for a couple of minutes, is some of the research we have around how successful the brands then are when consumers come to their websites at helping consumers find the products and helping them make those decisions. Because consumers want to do this online. 75% of the consumers in our research want to do their whole loan research and application online. And actually 58% in the UK market want to do the whole mortgage engagement online. They want to research and go all the way through the application process online as far as possible. So people are very engaged in wanting to research and complete this application through the online channel. The most important elements when deciding on a product are, unsurprisingly, rates and fees, but also trust in the company, but then suitability for my needs. It's not just about the cheapest product. I want the one that actually suits my needs specifically, and I have to come away from the process as a consumer happy that I've chosen the one that suits my needs specifically. And 20%, when faced with an issue in this journey, will just simply leave. You don't get a second chance with these consumers. They know there are other brands out there. They will just go if they find the process hard to complete. 22% these days now look for online chat. That is growing. It's growing rapidly even within the last 6 months. So having that instant channel to talk to consumers is becoming more and more important. I showed you these steps earlier. I'm not going to belabor this too much because this is quite a complicated graph, but just to show you the sort of look and feel of how the industry is across these steps. I told you about the DSE. This is the combination of consumers doing tasks at each step of this journey combined with the best practice audit that conducted by Global Reviews themselves. So each step has a score, a percentage, and the overall score for the entire DSE is a percentage. We normally get percentages around 55% for financial services. We'd say that generally meant that most brands were failing consumers at key points across the journey through initial engagement to applying online. Generally speaking, and mortgages and loans are no exception, the lowest scoring pieces across the financial services journey are in the evaluating options, which is, well, how am I as a consumer convinced that you've got a product that suits my needs? I found that you do mortgages, or I found that you do loans, but actually which one suits my needs specifically? And then the facilitating decisions is the next step, which is, well, okay, I found a product that suits my needs, but why am I taking it from you? Because I found one from HSBC, I found one from Barclays, I found one from Lloyds. Why am I choosing you over the others? And that is the same within loans. In fact, loans even worse, you might say here. Evaluating options scoring very low across the industry, and again, facilitating decisions doing very poorly across the industry. Consumers are really struggling, in many cases, to find products that suit their needs, and then to be sure that they're making the right decision when they choose a brand. So this sort of drills down the next step into one of those categories, evaluating options. As I say, this is very much about, can a consumer find a product that suits their needs? So we ask them to find a very specific mortgage with specific features. So can they go to the website and find a very specific mortgage with those specific features? It's generally the poorest performing task across the financial services industry. It's not just in mortgages, but it is a real issue for the financial services industry, helping consumers navigate what are often a range of products and really helping consumers understand which suits their needs specifically. And this is really interesting because if we just remember back to what we were talking about HSBC, if we remember HSBC in the mortgages, we saw them really increase their final selection between initial preference to final preferences. And actually you can see some of what's going on here. They are the highest scorers when it comes to helping consumers match products to needs. So when consumers are actually going to the website to say, well, actually, I'm a first-time buyer, I have this much deposit, this is the property I want to buy, how much it costs, how much could you lend me, what are the rates likely to be. The consumers actually in our study were the most successful in terms of finding the specific product to suit their needs. And that's because a couple of things. They weren't universally successful, 68% were successful. So it's still not perfect, but it was the most successful in the competitive set because it's very easy on the HSBC site to look at products on a needs-based. So these are my needs, this is what I want to do, what's the mortgage for, what's my value. I could also go straight into the tabs at the top, which look at my overall need. Am I a first-time buyer? Am I moving home? Am I existing home owner? There are tools that are easily accessible in terms of how much could I borrow. There are a number of calculators and guides in terms of helping me understand what's my affordability. So actually it's pretty simple when you come to the mortgage landing page to figure out where you're going to find out what products they have, both from a needs and methods and tools approach. On the flip side, we also saw there that the Santander consumers were least successful. And as you can see here, it was much harder for the consumers to actually figure out which products suited their needs best. Here the layout is just simply layout's very different. It's harder. We end up having consumers going backwards and forwards saying, oh, I don't think I found everything. I've looked at this page, but actually it doesn't seem to be everything they do. There isn't an easy calculator. From the home page, I end up having to go into the individual products to find the calculators. So again, the information is there. It was just much harder for consumers to find because there was really only one route to most of it. There weren't multiple routes for different people to find different approaches to find the content, and a lot of the content was several clicks buried down into the product information. The most successful brand we actually review in terms of finding products is actually St George in Australia. St George in terms of home loans here, again mortgages. As you can see here, multiple routes into the information here. They've got needs-based, so home first buyer, upgrading your home, investing, for the self-employed. You can also flip it the other way, so actually I want to compare the home loans and want to look at the interest rates. They've got routes into how much can I borrow, into the key tools from here. But there's also routes into alternative channels, so phones, callback, inquire, visit a branch. So multiple pathways, multiple methods to match the product needs, all clearly signposted from the landing page. So whether consumers are thinking about it from a needs-based or a products-based approach, they could easily find the product they were looking to from here. They were also very easily signposted towards the selector, and actually we found 100% of consumers who found the selector then found the right product. It was a very easy way to help consumers through in a mass of dozens of loan products. And then finally here, thinking about this facilitating decisions piece. I found that product, I was successful in finding the mortgage that I was interested in, or the loans I'm interested in. Why am I actually now picking you as a brand? Because there are 4 or 5 out there that look pretty much the same. What is it that makes you as a company stand out? And again, this is something that financial services brands are generally not very good at. Generally, there's a dearth of information around things like external comparison that could be implicit or explicit. It's hard to contact the company, and it's hard to really see why I would choose you as a brand. This is something UBANK, again in Australia, do very well. if we look at their funnel from the DME, in fact, for home loans, they come in with a tiny 4% unprompted recall. So they're really not at the top of people's minds at all when they're looking for a loan. But actually, by the end, 10% of the consumers in the market choose them. They are doing a number of things across that journey, obviously a number of search, aggregator things across that journey to make consumers aware of them, make consumers aware of their products. But then when you actually come to the website, they do an awful lot of different approaches in terms of why would you choose us. So awards, as I said, comparison could be external, explicit, so compare us directly against this brand, or implicit, which is what an awards does, is implicitly suggesting we're better than the competitors. Why would you apply for one of our loans? It actually has a competitor calculator for versus your current loan. It also explicitly shows interest rates against competitors. It has ratings and reviews, and it just simply goes beyond the normal why would you choose us? Oh, we have 24-hour 7 call centers. Well, great, so does everybody. Combination of implicit and explicit content within the range to give consumers reasons to choose their brand. And that's something that Aviva, certainly in the UK market, again, do very well. Looking back at the UK market, it's certainly not impossible to do. Again, you've got Aviva doing implicit and explicit. Here you've got Best Overall Insurer Awards, Money Awards. You've got good access to contextual FAQs, phone numbers with opening hours. You've got ratings, reviews, you've got why choose us, de facto. You've got these little sort of light tick boxes that are an explicit comparison with other brands. So thinking about once consumers have found a product with you, just because they've found a good one that meets their needs, you're still in that competitive set of 4 or 5 brands. You've still got to make that next step finally of why are they choosing your product over the 3 or 4 others that they've found that are just as suitable for them. So, very brief summary of what we've seen here in terms of the mortgages and loans. Financial services research's first preferences can be swayed for the right product and offerings, but it can be hard, and it depends a lot on first impressions. How do they know they can trust you? Do they have the product that suits their needs specifically, and can they see that quickly when they come to your website? Is it very easily signposted from the landing pages that you're going to have these products? Give them a helping hand to find products that suit those needs. Think needs, not products, and think about a variety of journey options to helping consumers to that content, because not everybody thinks in the same way. And also think of a variety of approaches to reinforce why they would choose your brand. Now, we are obviously out of time. In fact, we're at overtime, unfortunately, thanks to a slight hiccup at the beginning with the sound. So I apologize for that, but thank you very much for your time. As I say, we do this research across a number of financial services products, not just mortgages and loans, and also insurance and other markets. So if you are interested in seeing more about what we do, how these workshops run, how the DME and the DSE run, please let me know. We also run these across mobile, so if that's something you're interested in too, do talk to us. We can do all of this research across the mobile channel. So just in summary, I am Rebecca Jennings, Principal Client Advisor at Global Reviews. I'm on rebecca.jennings@globalreviews.com. Please do drop me an email if you have any queries or you would like a copy of the presentation. The webinar will also be appearing on our YouTube channel, and there's also all the other webinars we've run are actually up on the YouTube channel if you wanted to see any of the other runs we've run over the past couple of years. So thank you very much for your time, everybody, and have a good